ladies. I'm like, I have a problem with the language. What he said, I was reading that I don't understand, right? So my son comes home.
Similar questions.
100%. Similar questions, 100%. Exact questions, probably about 15%.
Eric Brown, 053, Eric Brown, 6053.
But you can expect to see on the exam three topics we didn't go over, just because it's pretty wide body of knowledge, but you'll see that even when you go over the exams, there's some stuff that we didn't go over. So there's going to be a couple of red herrings, but the best way is to go through it. Have you gone online with the, has anyone gone online to the test bank and taken the online extra tests from ASQ? Okay. Yeah, I sent you the link, you log in with my information, you click around a couple times.
I tried the one you sent me for those people
Yeah.
for December exam, and oh my God, it was so difficult for me.
Oh,
The one you sent me.
the one that I said that was a little harder than the extra exam.
The December one.
Yeah.
Remember you had some candidate in
Yeah,
December?
yeah. So that exam is a little bit harder, but okay.
So hard.
It's not that hard.
Ah.
But the best way to practice for this exam is to retake the exams. I can't emphasize that enough. Anyone do anything fun or interesting in the last couple of days since we last met? Fun, interesting?
I did the test.
You took the test. That's fun. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
but
Well,
I started.
most importantly, did you score yourself?
Yes.
Did you score where you need to be?
Yeah, it's supposed to be 80. That's what it says
Well,
on there.
You need to score.
Where I
Welcome.
What was the question?
So when you're retaking the test, you want to be scoring in the mid-90s because, right, you've seen these questions before. There's you know the material, you know what's coming, you know how that's going to go. So you need to keep drilling through them, and scoring in the 80s is better than scoring in the 60s, but you still need to bring yourself up into the 90s just by drilling through it. And most importantly,
But you know what is the thing in that is like same question comes up, and then once I fail in that question, I remember that answer.
That's
so
fine.
then I know that question.
But the more important reason is you understand why it's right.
Yeah.
As long as you understand why it's right and why the others are wrong, you're good.
Yes.
And even if you start to identify that question, well, you have 150 questions to play with. So I'm not sure you're going to memorize each and every one of those 150 questions. Just a bit of full disclosure, I am studying for the legal bar. And here is what I've been spending my time doing, practice exams, and just drilling through them as I drop my paperwork over. If you have to take a multiple choice exam, it's the best way to go through it. So I'm not only the teacher, I'm also a client.
I will sit down and cry if I get like 75 instead of 70.
No, you just need to keep drilling. You just need to keep drilling through it to get to where you need to be. Anyone else do anything fun or interesting? Not just.
I probably heard it 60, right?
There have been many people that have taken off Friday before the exam, or have hidden in the conference room and not done any work the day before the exam. I don't condone or endorse any of that, but it has been done.
Yeah. I took it off too, and I see Manisha took off.
I know nothing. I'm just the reporter of bad news. Anything else? Any other interesting, useful, fun things?
We come here every day.
Yeah, come here every day. There was a weekend in there.
Fun things.
There was a weekend in there. Okay, so let's fly through. Not fly through. Let's finish up where we were. What slide did we get up to last time?
We finished it at 30:41.
You mean?
We're on TBC.
Yeah, we were on. We were in our time scheduling stuff. Yep. Because I really want to get to the coffee.
I was in training last week.
Yeah.
I wasn't here.
You watch the video. The videos are up.
Yeah.
Anyone actually watch the videos? Because I'm not getting many click-throughs.
I watch, but sometimes I think the way on the either if I see you better talking, then I can't see the slide, those connections. So
Really?
It's not like a real good full coverage. So if people don't have slides or something like
that's interesting. You should.
And it's like,
the video should be capturing the slides, image, and me in a little box.
Sometimes because of the way the distance or your
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
But the audio should be good no matter what, right? Yeah. Okay, as long as the audio is good and you can see the slides, we should be where we need to be.
Yeah, I tried to watch the one before because I got stuck in meeting. I was not able to.
I gotta go get my other package.
Okay. Unfortunately, there were two that were labeled 9. There was.
I had two that said 2 different titles.
Yep. We're on the second 9.
You want to see what is the
I apologize. I'm making everyone's life complicated. Ah, there we go. That's the slides. Okay, we're up to here, right? Okay, and we're talking about how this is sort of misleading, how that one little slide at the bottom is somewhat off kilter. So we talked about what total processing cycle time is it's just the lead time plus the total processing cycle time plus the wait time, right? The whole idea here being that the cycle time encompasses the entire amount of time it takes to actually do what? What's the difference between cycle time and lead time? Correct. So
Cycle.
correct, to actually do the stuff, right? So the lead time is the total amount of time it takes you from start to finish, where the cycle time is when you're actually just doing stuff. So it doesn't capture the waiting time associated with that. So we should remember back to when we did our value stream mapping, what value added is. What is value added?
When actually process the sample.
Well, it's a little bit more important than that.
Touching the sample.
No, it's different than that.
No, it's a customer.
Yeah?
Requirements. I mean, I go more closer to satisfy customer requirements.
We're getting closer.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what's value added is anything that changes the fit, the form, or the function
Yeah.
of a good sold or a product delivered or service rendered, right? So remembering that this stuff can be applied to goods or services. So if you're doing anything that your customer is willing to pay for, it's value added. And to do that, you have to understand who your customer is. And different customers, different things are important to, right? FDA cares about one thing, patient on the operating table cares about something a little different. So value added time is the total of your value added steps, right? So how do you calculate out your total value added time? Well, you add up all your value added steps. Kind of, some things are just as straightforward as they appear. Okay, then we have takt time. So takt time is an important concept. It's the heart rate of your process. It's the drumbeat in the theory of constraints. It is the production rate that you need to have to meet customer demand. And you can see it written both ways. So you can see it written as the amount of time per unit, or the units per minute, or units per hour. So it's the production rate that you need to have to satisfy your customers. So it's the demand divided by the amount of time available. Now the amount of time available, if this were the black belt exam, they would try and trip you up and have you remember that people get lunch hours. So an 8-hour shift is generally 7 hours if you get them lunch. So it's the demand divided by the number of productive hours, or the reciprocal, depending on which way it's written. But for the purposes of this exam, you should be familiar that takt time is the production rate that is needed to satisfy customer demand.
Can you repeat that?
Yep, takt time is the production rate that is needed to satisfy customer demand. So if my customer demands 100 units per day, I need to produce at 100 units per day. If I produce at 101 units, I'm going to have a surplus. And that's going to result in inventory, and inventory, as we know, is a form of waste. It's a form of muda.
So when you say demand, it's not the units.
It could be,
This is saying the hours.
well,
I don't understand the formula why HS says effective hours.
yeah, so the top.
Yeah.
It can be written both ways. You can have the number of minutes per unit needed, or the number of minutes per unit, or the minutes per unit, or units per minute. You can have it written both ways. So that's written as the reciprocal of what I said. So it's the number of hours, so that's the number of hours you can produce. So this will give you the minutes per unit that you have to produce.
Okay.
In the alternative, you can have units per minute. They're the same thing, they're the reciprocal, and both
Yeah.
are important.
Okay. And the bottom is the number of units.
It's demanded, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Everyone's cool with that? And how it can be written both ways, even though I've now said it forwards and backwards and confused myself. Hopefully I haven't confused you. So it's the production rate that you need to satisfy your customer demand. Okay, so now we have some scheduling tools. Okay, 15 minutes. So we have Gantt charts. We have activity network diagrams, critical path, and PERT charts. Any of you seen a Gantt chart before? Yeah. Gantt charts are a really useful Microsoft project, which is anyone use project? sort of a clunky program that does Gantt charts. Yeah. So what a Gantt chart is, it illustrates the start and finish and the elements of a project. So you list out the tasks that need to be completed on in the first column, and then you list out the amount of time that each project is going to take.
In this case, the producers are the number of days, right?
Well-
Duration is days. It's like, what is the middle column?
Yep.
The presence?
Okay, so the predecessor are what tasks need to be completed before that task can begin. So task 4 can only begin after task 2 is completed.
What is the black line?
Black lines represent the slack, so the amount of free time, and we'll get to that in a couple slides. So slack is the amount of time that the project task can slip without it affecting the critical path.
So you are trying to tell me this slide, first grade is a first start task. If that grade is not completed, the blue can start.
Correct. Well, what the red is outlining is the critical path, and we'll get to the critical path in a couple slides. So the red illustrates the shortest duration that the project can be completed. So now we have the activity network diagram, which is pretty similar. All these tools are very similar. They're trying to encapsulate the same thing. So now we have the activity network diagram. So this is basically like the Gantt chart, but it's sort of showing it in two-dimensional space. And it's showing what tasks can be completed in series, meaning that one task can't start before the prior task, and what tasks can be completed in parallel. So if we look at the one that's up there, is task 3 can't start until both task 2 and task 5 have completed. So on what day will task 3 start? Okay, everyone understand the question? And this is actually a likely question you'd see on the exam. Is on what day will task 3 begin, assuming we start on 0?
It could begin on fourth or third day.
Yep, no problem.
Task third can begin on fourth day, according to the topper, but 2 days, 3 days. So it could start fourth day, or it could start
Okay, but 2 plus 3 is how many?
5 days.
Okay, so if we go up the top branch, we get 5 days, right?
Right.
If we go down the bottom branch, we end up with 3 days. So when can task 3 begin?
4 days.
Okay, raise your hand if you think it's 3. Raise your hand if you think it's 5.
No, I don't know.
Raise your hand. I'm out of hands.
I feel like 5.
Okay, why do you think it's 5?
Yes, because task 1 takes 2 days, task 2 takes 3 days.
Okay,
You have to go with 1, 3. There is a longest path.
correct, exactly.
Critical path.
For task 3 to be able to execute, you need task 2 and 5 to be completed. But task 2 is not completed until day 5. So you're right. The next task can't begin at least until day 5. Because all the predecessor tasks need to have completed before that. So if you're trying to assemble a car, if the frame is there early, but the engine isn't there, you don't have a car. You have to wait for the engine to show up. You need both components there to be able to make your final assembly.
I have one question.
Yep.
You mentioned with all these different 4 options for the scheduling.
Yep.
tools.
These guys.
Is there like any kind of a requirement or for the preferences, which one you choose?
Well, what
in
actually-
conditions?
Yeah, actually, they've really merged into each other, and we'll get to that. 2 of them were developed sort of independently. The CPM was developed by the military, and PERT was developed by industry. And the military obviously was a little creepy by keeping it to themselves. Industry was off in their own world, and they subsequently merged together. And they all are really just looking at the activity network diagram flows, and the difference between the activity network diagram and the Gantt charts are just how you lay out the information. Sometimes laying it out in more of a 2-dimensional space is easier to understand than showing everything sort of serialized.
So basically critical path, you are trying to say the shortest time to achieve the
No,
final
longest
task?
path.
Well, the critical
longest-
path can be defined two different ways. So it's the longest sequence from start to finish. And it represents the shortest period of time that all of the steps can be completed.
Yeah, because the questions they ask is like from A to like Z, whatever.
Yep.
And then they have like a small one where you can do like 6 steps to the final, and some
Yep.
of them are like,
Yep, so it's the critical path is the longest path from A to N. But that represents the shortest amount of time you can complete the overall task, right? Because everything needs to be completed, and the longest path is the shortest. Okay, so here's the critical path analysis.
We can go back to activity.
Yep, we can go back.
So when you say the task, that 2 lines, task 1 and 2 and 4 and 5, it goes parallel. It
Yep.
means task 1 takes 2 days, task 4 takes 1 day, but it has to finish within.
Well, yeah, we'll get to the intervals there, and we get to how we determine how long a task is going to when we get to the critical path method and the PERT method. But what you should understand is since task 1 and 4 are in parallel, there's no relationship between them. They can run concurrently.
Okay.
Task 1 and 2 run all off by themselves, and task 4 and 5 run off by themselves.
So maximum time to get to task 3, that's why we said it 5, because
Yep.
that's the maximum. Task
Yep.
1 and 2 takes
Yep.
the maximum time.
Because we're not going to have the engine and the chassis there until 5 days.
Okay.
Or we can't release the product until the lab results come out and we can actually get it out the door. So the processors are finished in the core and sitting out there waiting for the lab to tick off. So we still can't release the product until 14 days, until it comes off of the 14-day hold.
It's basically the same concept like a workshop, right?
Exactly the same concept. Yep. So we have the critical path method was developed by DuPont in the 50s. It assumes that everything is deterministic. So a priori, before I do anything, before I lay out my task, I know how long everything's going to take. How good of an assumption is that? That I know how long something's going to take before I've done it? Yeah, it's generally not a great assumption, but sometimes it is. So the critical path, as we just defined it, is the sequence of activities which add up to the longest overall duration, which is the shortest overall project completion time. Be familiar with being able to answer the question that's up there, is why that is. So any delay along the critical path results in what? A delay in the overall project, right? What happens if there's a delay along the non-critical path? Nothing might happen, right? So if the processors in the core, instead of processing in 1 day, they leave it in the core for an extra day before they kick it out. But they put this test out to the lab on the proper amount of time. Does that affect the release time? Well, processed, samples go off into the lab, and for some reason they don't bring it out of the core. It just hangs out in the box for a while. Samples are off on test for 14 days. The thing comes out 2 days later of the core and is now into packaging.
no, it's like.
Correct, because that isn't along the critical path. So what happens if there's a delay along the non-critical path is it might not affect the overall project delivery. It might, and what you have to do is evaluate, has my non-critical path now become the critical path because of this delay? So there's an example for you to walk through on your own. We're going to get to the coffee. I told you, we're going to get to the coffee. We're going to get there. So then we get to PERT. Well, PERT's very similar, except the main difference is that the times are probabilistic. So it uses,
We can go back to CP and this example.
yeah,
I'm sorry.
that's fine.
So now when it says an activity ID duration, right?
Mhm.
So when we have to count the path, we
Are you on this guy?
add up the durations.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yep.
Those are lost on that.
That's fine. Yeah, what this is laying out is it's trying to capture the idea that you see in the Gantt chart does really well of when you can start, when you can finish, and recognizing the fact that other tasks might run late. And to really figure out what the slack is, the black lines that that project shows you. We have our definitions in PERT. So PERT's looking at the fact that we don't necessarily know how long a task is going to take. So it introduces some different terms. So there's the optimistic time. So that's if everything goes right, what is the absolute minimum amount of time a task could possibly take? That's generally the one you quote the customer. Then you have the pessimistic time. which is the one that is, if everything goes wrong, how long is it possibly going to take? Then you have the most likely time. Well, that's how long it's going to take on average. Then you have this idea of float or slack. So if anyone asks you what floats your boat, you can say time. Come on, guys. So float is the amount of slack you have, the amount of time you allow it has to slip before it becomes part of the critical path. So the key concept from the PERT approach is the expected time. And it's just a weighted average of the optimistic time plus 4 times the most likely time plus the pessimistic time divided by 6. Anyone know why it's divided by 6?
Yes.
Why is it divided by 6?
Because it is single for optimistic and pessimistic and 4 times. Is that
Most likely.
most likely time?
So 1 plus 1 is 2 plus 4 is 6. It's a weighted average. So it just wants you to capture the idea that the most likely time is, well, most likely. On the exam, I'd be surprised if there isn't a question that says calculate out the expected time, total expected time. And you're going to say that's a math question, and you're going to be right. That actually is a math question. It requires doing computations.
I still don't get why it's a 6.
Because it's a weighted average. So you're weighting 4 as 4 times more than O or P, but each contributes.
1 O plus 4 M plus 1 P.
So there's 6 things that you're averaging.
So 1 O,
Yep.
4 M's, and 1 P. Oh, so you're just adding the, I get it.
Yep, it's just a weighted average.
So most likely takes 4 times more. So we just divide it, make it average.
Yep. You want to increase the weighting of that factor. Exactly. Cool. So there's a PERT example.
For example, it's so complicated.
It really isn't. It's just exactly like the activity network diagram. It's just drawing it in a different way.
What is that milestone?
Milestone means something that a deliverable, a touchstone. Remember, we went back to our process mapping. That's when someone's going to basically be able to look at the score and say, are we winning? Are we losing? Where are we at? And that loops back to your project charter, because your project charter lays out those goals and milestones so that the project champion can look at your project as it's progressing through time and say, are we where we're supposed to be? Are we having problems? You can think of the projects that have gone on here where the milestones just keep getting missed and missed, and then the thing doesn't ultimately work. So on your own, you can create a Gantt chart for passing the Greenbelt exam. Actually, we'll loop back to this. I think this is actually important. We'll do this next class, but I want to get the coffee stuff in. And you ultimately will create something that looks like that, your predecessor said.
What's that?
That's a Gantt chart that one of your predecessors created for taking this class way back in March. I think that's March.
For the needs, but for the
Civic safety.
what is, I can.
Why
tell you,
does different exams take so long?
Under the month is what?
What?
It is, no, it's a date.
Just the date. March 6, 7, 6, 13, 20, 27, April 3rd, 10th.
So those points are those people who.
No, and this is each one of the activities. So they had to register, they had to attend class in week 1, they took the pre-test, they joined JSQ, week 2 was class, week 3 class, register for exam, etc. All that was just one student who I happened to take a picture of's work. Okay, now let's play with coffee. Okay, so any Dunkin' Donuts fans? Starbucks fans? No one drinks coffee?
Dunkin' Donuts.
Okay, so we got 2 Dunkin' Donuts and 1 Starbucks. Can we agree that they taste different?
Yes.
Obviously, some of us have
They
preferences.
cost different too.
Okay. So I ordered a coffee traveler from Starbucks and a box of Joe from Dunkin' Donuts. Which do you think was more expensive?
Starbucks.
So, do you think how much the coffee traveler was from Starbucks usually?
$14.95.
And would you kindly read how much the box of Joe was from the
So
business?
395.
They're the same exact box. Yes. Okay, so,
And you get the fancy little carrier with the cup and the sugar.
yeah, well, they give me the bag with the cup.
Yeah, but this is much more
The
presentable.
moves absolutely are awful because what ultimately happens is the ears breaking and dumping everything. It looks cool, it doesn't work so cool. Okay,
A lot of sugar they give you.
they give me lots of toys. Okay, so we as humans appreciate the fact that they taste differently. But we talked a little bit about measuring stuff, right? We talked about metrology, we talked about design of experiments. Well, we didn't talk about design of experiments, but we talked about all that geek R&R stuff, right? So we're actually going to play with our coffee. So we have meters. So this is a water tester. It actually gives you the total dissolved solids. So total dissolved solids represents the amount of stuff, of material in your water. So what is coffee? Well, it's a suspension of coffee ground up in water. We have a pH probe. Anyone remember, lab folks, what is pH measured? Mhm. Okay. So do we expect our coffee to be acidic or basic? Acidic. Coffee is acidic, yes. Okay, so does that mean we expect it to have a high pH or a low pH? Wow, cool. Somebody remembers their basic chem.
They work in the lab. I put all in the You what?
Remember it.
Okay, and then we have, this is about $100 meter. It also will give you temperature. This is about a $5 meter that also gives us TDS.
What is TDS?
Total dissolved solids, the amount of coffee in your coffee.
I'm thinking kilos. Sorry.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about factors and levels. So factors are the things that you're going to change. Levels are the things that you're going to change them to. So we're going to do an experiment with 3 factors, each at 2 levels. And we're going to look at a bunch of responses. So factor 1 is store. So Dunkin' Donuts versus Starbucks. Factor is store, levels are Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts. Then we're going to look at another factor. Regular, decaf. So caffeination is a factor. We're going to look at it at 2 levels, caf, decaf.
Would you just repeat factor?
Yep.
What are the factors?
The fact-
Factor 1 is store.
Yep.
Store.
Factor 2 is caffeine.
Yep.
And then.
Factor 3, contamination.
Yes. It's 3 factors, and the level is 2.
Each one has 2 levels, yes.
Yeah.
And how many of you contaminate your coffee with this stuff?
Of course we do.
Bovine lactations.
So what are the levels?
And that's, the second factor was caffeine?
Yep,
And the
decaf.
levels are regular and decaf?
Exactly.
And then the next one is,
Contamination. So black versus
And you say contamination is what?
black
It's a
versus
factor, you said.
Cream.
whatever, bovine lactations.
Go on, like milk.
couldn't you also put it as sugar versus?
Oh, absolutely. We look at other factors as well.
Sorry. Level is caffeine and decaf. 2 levels.
Yeah, and
Yep, everything's 2 levels.
black or milk. Which milk or black milk?
Okay. So we have cups, we have probes, we have coffee. So what are our responses going to be? Our responses are going to be responses to the things we're going to measure. So we're going to look at the total dissolved solids on the blue meter,
Total dissolved solid and
the G
what?
meter. We're going to look at the responses. We're going to look at the total dissolved solids from our $5 meter, the blue one. And we're going to look at the total dissolved solids from our expensive meter.
Oh, so we are doing 2.
Yeah. And also our expensive meter will tell us the temperature. Temperature is kind of important to us if we're drinking your coffee, right? I like my coffee tepid.
But don't responses is whether it's black or it's cream, whether it's.
Those are the levels.
Then I understand what the response is. That's what measures it?
Yeah, that's the output. That's the that's the result of those factors that you want to measure. So we want to see, does Starbucks taste the same as Dunkin' Donuts versus Starbucks? That's the question that we're trying to answer. Then we want to say, does decaf taste the same as Ringo? Or does it, what's the effect of putting milk into my coffee? So we're going to look at that as it affects the total dissolved solids, because that's how rich the taste is going to be. Then we're going to look at the temperature, because cold coffee doesn't taste the same.
But how does that meter be a response? I don't get it.
Oh, the meter, you stick it in, and it gives you a number. That's the response. The value that you read off the meter is the response.
Oh, but the meter, the tool is not the response.
Correct.
So I thought you were saying the tool, that's right.
Oh, I apologize.
Okay.
If I wasn't clear, the value that the meter reads will give you the response. But we're going to have a response for the inexpensive meter, a response for the expensive meter, or a response will be temperature, a response also for the pH. That's not too many things. How many things are you testing our products for? So we have coffee, we have cups, we have meters. I don't know.
I did this before. You're gonna take the coffee, you're gonna pour it in the cup, and then you're gonna take the meter and you're gonna put it over there and you're gonna measure the tool.
I can do that.
Well, there's lots of you, and do you think you should, how do you think you should go about doing this?
I think one person should document as we start with the, what do you call it?
I think they each
That's
get their own
like-
coffee and they each take a measurement. That's why you have all these meters.
No, I think one.
I mean, I have four of
data
each, but you guys can figure out. Now go through the Tuckman cycle. We have about 2 minutes of Tuckman cycle. You remember what the Tuckman cycle is?
With the what?
Tuckman cycle.
Tuckman?
Yes. Yes, that's the. Well, that's yeah.
I don't think we should take the.
Yes, yes, yep, you got them all right.
What were they?
Okay, what's the Tuckman cycle? First was forming. Forming, storming.
Norming, performing.
Yes, and
Churning and detection.
What came after performing?
journey and recognition. Have the party. Go out and get a beer. Okay, so Tuckman cycle. Damn you.
I feel because the responses are with 2 different meters and 2 different meter temperature and pH, those things are not going to change even if we get 4 times. Understand? So one person makes one thing and then everything we document. I think individual people don't need to do that.
No, remember our sources.
Huh?
To caffeinated,
So why don't you work with that?
Also, you want more than one result for the same factor or more than one time to get kind of average?
well, one for each pH. Well, one for the pH.
Go here and see the
one
table.
for the TDS. So I guess one decaf and one decaf.
Starbucks
from-
that's caffeinated and black. You're getting Starbucks that's weak.
Yeah.
You're getting Starbucks is caffeinated and black. Starbucks is.
No, that I'm fine. We have to make different one for the factors, but what we kind of meant, I thought we want individual for the thing instead of we can do the team.
I don't,
Each one. Each
for the
one.
record, I don't care. I just want you to get data. Because we need the data to play with
I
it.
think I had this, agreement.
What do you want?
Starbucks, black, decaf, I mean, Starbucks, caffeinated, decaf,
Starbucks, like, this is that.
That's the Starbucks, yeah. That's Starbucks regular. That's the decaf.
Okay, so you want me to start with recap first?
either one.
No, somebody has to write the stuff, so I want to bring.
I'm writing the stuff. I'm trying to in the table.
And yes, you have to take the cover off. Believe it or not, I've had people. No, I'm saying that from experience.
Okay, so who is writing? Starbucks, recap.
Yeah.
Starbucks, recap with the blue, so we are first thing. So,
Inexpensive one.
Yeah.
Inexpensive.
But there is a different color, one is blue, one is blue. Okay. So
So you're gonna check it?
we are checking.
Checking.
Total
TDC.
TDS, total Oh,
There's all sorts.
sucks.
Just hit the use, don't worry about it.
I just before I want.
Then I'm gonna stick that in.
Is there any time requirement when we repeat it or?
I don't know.
You can let us know.
I don't know anything.
Just check it. Just check it. Once it's fluctuating, it's not speeding yet. So this is the pH, right? TD. 191. Oh. It will stop flickering, right? When it's-
No.
It's fluctuating a lot.
Yes.
Is it around the same number?
No, it's
No.
going from 179 to 192.
I can't read the small things here. Is there anything that is telling us to hold it for something we need certain? There are some charts in that.
Remember when we talked about gauge R&R and you talked about what were the two sources of variability in gauge R&R? There's
I'm sorry.
in gauge R&R, remember we said how there was a source of variation that was due to the measurement thing itself?
Mhm. So you want to calibrate.
Oh, no, you
What
can,
is standardized?
you have to recognize the fact that your instrument isn't always going to give you your same reading. So,
With the variation.
yeah, so continue reading. You don't need to calibrate it, you just need to stick it in, and get a number.
You can carry this. It's not a lot.
I mean.
I think they're overanalyzing it.
I think
You just have to take the coffee and just stick
But
it
it
to
keeps on changing. So
we know, but that's
That's why people take it. And for the reproducibility part, so 2 seconds.
You want me to do another?
I
But the temperature in the coffee is gonna change if you move the meter too, because you'll have high and low spots. Is that what they're measuring the temperature in?
that's one of the things that they need to measure. They need to do lots of measurements and they have 20 some odd minutes.
Yeah, because we have to use two different.
Let's see if we can further confuse them.
Oh, don't do that. That's not nice.
But this instrument.
There's a box of instruments that you can play with. I'm gonna save them, Wendy.
No, I did this before, so I'm waiting to see what, I did this twice.
I know.
I know.
And the results are consistent. That's the cool part. Is that I've now done this about 16 times and the results are the same every time. So there's actually really an effect.
I'm still surprised. I think the price went up though, because
It's been multiple Dunkin' Donuts, and I've noticed it the last 5 times I've done it. So
it's always been that way. That's how it's
it's been close. I've only noticed that it's become $2 when it was brought to my attention because everyone says that it's going to be more expensive. I started looking at the receipts and
I'm surprised.
yeah.
Yeah.
If you look at the regular 16-ounce coffees, they're within like 10 cents of each other. And Dunkin' Donuts doesn't have the same pricing. That's one of the weird things. Since they're franchised, the pricing is a little different.
Oh, yeah, completely different. My son's worked in 2 different Dunkin' Donuts before, and all the prices would change. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's hard. Starbucks, for the majority of freestanding stores are Seattle owned, so the pricing's going to be consistent within the region.
Yeah.
But
But even if you go down 35 here, if I go over here at lunch and get a cup of coffee, it's $2. If I go down there, it's $2.10.
really?
Yeah.
Huh.
So I go over there because I want a cup of wine. Need a cup? What do you want?
No, he wants to put, maybe you don't want to put that. Put it in.
So now he's,
Go all across the street in that big meeting.
Okay, we need to start getting some data. We've got 16 minutes.
then I'm gonna stick this in.
Well, make sure you take the cover off. Take the cover off?
What is the number?
Yeah, take the cover off. Over.
down, that is the expense. What is that around?
It's like 186.
Okay, so one is.
Times 10 units.
Yeah, times 10.
So
Units are important.
it's part per million, so like the number that we're getting, they're really close to each other.
Well, it's times 10, but just make sure you just write down whatever number you're getting. We'll do our data analysis once we get the data. Just be consistent.
Okay.
Okay, I get 186.
Yeah, do the PH fast because. Oh,
I think we need paper towels. Do we have
180.
That was what? Each?
No, this is weekend.
Can you both again?
Yeah, I took 2 cups because we had 2 different TBS. So we only have one for the pH, right?
We have lots of pH meters. It's a bunch in the middle.
No, but do you still want to take the second?
So now we can create again for both of these, right?
You know, the pH.
Okay, so somebody wants to bring the caffeinated.
You taking pH too?
These are decaf. So now we have to do
So
caffeinated.
these are both decaf.
Yeah,
Also, the wings make it hard to pour.
Yeah,
So we need to create another pH.
I think just.
This is the inexpensive one, right?
No, cafe is
Caffeinated?
not.
Yeah.
So it's caffeinated Starbucks?
yes.
That's that. Okay, it took us 5 minutes to get 2 data points.
This one is cap. Okay, big cap one.
This is decaf, right? This is decaf, right?
Hold on. Yeah, hold on.
Oh, cool.
Then right here, right?
How much is pH? 9.5.
It keeps on changing.
For pH,
Yeah. How much you are getting?
it should be low, so
It's like 3,
I'm getting like 4.5.
That seems more reasonable.
Changed a lot from 6 to 11.
It's not clear.
I got 4.5.
Yeah. No.
So that's caffeinated Starbucks.
What do you need?
Decaf.
Decaf Starbucks?
Yeah.
It's in the cup.
That's decaf. Doing the caffeine.
This is happening. I need.
These are decaf. These are decaf.
Oh, they do?
No, I have. I don't know what you guys. These two are decaf, this one's caffeinated, so now we need.
Oh,
Okay, 4.2.
So then I'm writing clearly.
No, you just don't get confused. First, let's finish this.
You can always just label them. That might be smart.
Now 4.2. Brian, how much did you get with this equipment?
4.5.
Okay, 4.5, so 2 readings. please. Okay, now move to caffeine. Okay? So, no, that's fine, I just want to. I think that pH meter is not good. No. You want to put another one in the pH meter? Or these two? Okay, done.
So you're done with that one.
It's on the other side. You wrote it already. Yeah.
Decaf. Nah, I have to do that. So this is Starbucks. This is completely different.
We are not doing this one.
Hold on, let her finish Starbucks. What do you want to use? You know, same thing. No, but he wants us to take 2 readings, so whatever he
This
uses.
was 8 or 6.
Okay, 8 or 6, write it down.
8 or 6, which one?
One
clear. Extensive mitosis, 806, caffeinated. What is that one?
So, how are we doing? We have like 10 minutes to go.
Few more minutes.
Because we haven't even gotten to the bovine lactations yet.
What's one for the dummy ones in chat?
126.
No, they are doing Dunkin' Donuts, we are doing Starbucks, so like.
We did already.
No, this is not Dunkin' Donuts, Starbucks caffeine. So don't write this.
That's why I did the table, that's why I can read it.
That's fine.
Give me one number, one.
158. So then, that one gave us the wrong, into 10, yeah. 10.
So while you're thinking about this, how many cups will you ultimately have sitting on your table at the end of doing your 3 factors, 2 levels times 2 repetitions? Keep collecting your data. Just think. Thinking, keep collecting your data.
Yeah, I can read that also. First time you can answer 2 or 1.7.
What is 5.7?
On page.
PH for the gas? 5.7 with inexpensive.
No, there is no inexpensive for this.
So why you are doing this to them? Okay. I cross that.
No, you have to keep that, pH
Okay.
should be the same.
Oh, we have to.
We should make the table first before we start this one.
Where's the?
This I want to change.
The milk should be in the back.
No, but I think now we have it right to.
We did a green one?
Is it right?
No, you don't need to share. You just need the milks. And you need to talk about how much milk you're going to put in and how much milk the coffee you're going to put in.
86, 8.6. No, this is 8.6. That's why I said this is the wrong one. Let's do it 5.8. Because it's fluctuating, right? Right? So you say 5.8.
Okay, so we have one. We're through the cap decaf. Now we need to do the milks.
What can you do? 158 was TDS, not TDS. So why you cross that out?
I thought she said here.
No,
Okay, so 158.
caffeine.
Okay, so do we want to just put the milks into the existing samples, or do we want to pull new samples? What do you think? They probably got cold, right?
But I think we did not take the temperature.
You sure?
Oh.
All I remember was we had this doing But very, very inexpensive.
I think I don't like this. Equipment is so much fluctuating.
Most equipment fluctuates. But the question is, can you get a meaningful result from fluctuating equipment?
No.
No?
No, because we are not getting, cost of.
That's a premium.
No, we are not getting.
You want to take those?
Yeah.
These are,
Yeah.
and that one's good.
I don't know, we go up with the temperature.
Oh, right.
We don't.
I don't know.
Yes.
You got all that information?
For the record, I've done this with fifth graders and not had a problem.
I did TDS and PH, right? I did TDS. I left all the data here. Then we go. You're gonna take that with you. You can take black pen with us. You know, the gas and deep and and so on.
We set temperature. Yes.
Well, when you stick the TDS, when you stick the expensive meter in, it gives you temperature.
You know,
But
2.6. 2.6. So that is your PS unit on donkey cart? Okay. No. Oh. They are not stable and very often controlled.
Yeah, let's get I don't have something. Okay, I'm go for Deacon. And what's her Deacon? If you push it down to the holding. Holding and it will stay. Just get more strength.
I don't like
Should have brought the pins with the strength. 6.4 for cash.
yeah.
What about the? I lost the head. So I just going to do this.
what they are doing.
6.5. 6.5 for each.
One. 135.
This TDS, right?
What is 199?
One.
$52.5 for around 5.
Yeah, it's one there.
Yeah, it's fine.
Oh, you mean? Okay, this is what I'm.
157.
Okay.
Do we get over data? Did we get the data?
We're done with it.
We need more Duncan?
We're done with it.
Done with Duncan? We're done. Wait. We finished?
Wait, huh?
One time.
We predict 109 times 10 is what you get?
Yeah.
109 times 10.
Shouldn't be getting more. What was the last one?
49.
Oh, okay.
So what is 129 times 10?
3.2 for, yeah.
Down is temperature, and the top is TDS. Top
Well,
is
what's it
TDS.
reading?
Top is
I thought it
TDS.
was
Down
like-
is TDS.
Yep. Lower.
The point was to take out both so you can see.
Yeah, so that's.
So you see, are you getting a couple?
Did you do this? No.
Is it any similarity?
Okay, so here we can put it from
This one.
Yeah, it should have a cover.
I know, that's why I brought it over.
Okay, so how many observations did we make? A lot. A lot is not an answer.
What temperature and what is the?
How many observations did we make? Okay, so there's 2 observations for, let's just go, how many,
3 factors.
3 factors, 2 levels each. But how many things do we have to measure? How many numbers have you written down for each output? So you had to measure the decaf Starbucks, right? Black. You had to measure the decaf Starbucks with milk. You had to measure the regular Starbucks black, the regular Starbucks with milk, right? So how many total observations did you make?
I think we have to make 20.
Yes. And because you did two different sets of them, right? You did 1, you did 2, we should have 16 total data points for everything. So because what we did is we did 3 factors, 2 levels, and 2 repetitions. And we'll go with what those terms mean next class. So we should have 16 data points to play with for each output, right? So, and our outputs were what? Well,
Yes.
TDS, temperature, pH, and the second TDS. So we should have 2 TDS measurements. We should have a temperature measurement and a pH measurement for each one of those 16 samples that we did, right? Do we have this?
It's all over the place.
It's all over the place. Okay, but we have written down numbers.
Yeah.
We can sort of decipher your hieroglyphics next class so we can have data, right? Okay, so your homework, this is the only time I'm going to have you, I'm going to assign you homework because otherwise you're going to watch me key in data. You need to email me an Excel spreadsheet with your data. Just so I don't have to sit here and type it and you guys watch me type. Because what we're going to do next class is we're going to play with it. And it's not fun to watch me type numbers.
Okay.
So your one homework assignment for the entire course is to send me data.
So she has some and you have some.
I don't care how it gets to me. I need these 16 data points.
One person can do presentation.
And please drink your coffee or bring it to the calf so it can be consumed.
What do you need?
We're done.
Where's Duncan? Yeah.
Dunkin' decaf's in the big cup. Yep. Actually, since it's Dunkin' decaf, you can probably just take the entire thing. Just take the entire thing. Because no one else drinks decaf.
Really don't?
No, just take it. Just take it.
I'm not gonna drink it.
Oh.
I'll experiment with it.
Oh, you want to play with it?
Well, no, I have to do 2 more.
Oh, I didn't. I'm sorry. I thought everyone was done.
Yeah, I thought I was done too.
Oh, that's okay. I'm not going to throw you out.